All right. So apparently we're back, I hope. Yeah, it looks like it. So we still got two people. Sorry for the interruption. Hey, it's live radio and computers have problems sometimes. So anyway, I don't know where you left off or where you got cut off, I guess is a better way to put it. But let me just kind of back up on what I was saying. The Jeffrey Epstein video. I watched it. I didn't watch all 10 hours of it. I just watched, bits and pieces here and there, and it purported to show Jeffrey Epstein's cell. I didn't really see that in most of the video. You just see some people walking back and forth. Also, there was the 1 minute or so that had evidently been edited out. Now, there was a skip, and the Department of Justice has tried to explain this away, saying, well, it was just a video glitch. You see, this whole system is from 1999, and they record over the same video every day. That's preposterous. Why would a federal holding facility or a holding facility of any kind, by the way, still be stuck on an analog system? That doesn't make any sense. Secondly, if it's a correction facility, you would think that things happen, during a day that you might want to, keep a hold of for a little bit, just in case you need to, I don't know, prosecute somebody, used to convict them of another crime they committed. So I don't buy the explanation. As far as the 1 minute goes, 1 minute is a heck of a long time, and you can do a lot in a minute. I can tell you that 1 minute on this program sometimes feels like an eternity. And so I'm not exactly sure why they think that that's okay. But at the very least, what they should have done is assigned a staffer. Hey, you watch this video, you watch every minute of it, and I want to know if there is any sort of gap in it whatsoever. If it skips in any way, I mean, they should have been able to catch that. So there's an extraordinary level of incompetence. Secondly, I don't buy any of the excuses that they gave. In fact, I find them kind of insulting. Being in this business and knowing a lot about video and how I don't know about surveillance systems, but I know a heck of a lot about video. That if there's a gap in it, there's a problem, and a minute is a heck of a long time. So I don't buy any of that. And the Trump administration should have come clean from the very whatever that truth is. Whatever ends up being, whether the video was doctored, whether somebody in the prison covering for, I don't know, but just come clean, because that's what they promised the American people. Pam Bondi over and over, Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, though I think that he was kind of on the outside, that he didn't realize what was going to happen until he, was part of the Department of Justice. But whatever. The Trump administration didn't come forward. They didn't come clean. You heard Donald Trump last week try to say, why are you guys always, also interested in this? Well, it's because you promised transparency, and some of the people in your administration are not giving it to us. All right. So, I mean, I know that there are other things associated with it, and it's just kind of a 30,000-foot view of the whole Epstein thing. But now I want to kind of switch gears a little bit and go to Megyn Kelly and Ben Shapiro. And they were on Megyn Kelly's podcast, I think it was yesterday. Let's see here, on Monday. And they had a little dust up about this Epstein thing and what high-ranking sources have told them. It's a little bit long, but I want to go ahead and play it to you, just because I think that it'll help set the stage for the more of the discussion here. And if you just give me just a second here, I'll find it right here. Just a second. It's heck not having a producer, but we're making do. Here we go. Here's Megyn Kelly and Ben Shapiro. It's a little bit long, but let's go ahead and watch it, and then we'll talk about it. Here we go.
In the law enforcement, I have my own sources high up in the law enforcement, let's say, I'll just go that far, who say, not only do we believe he was an agent, but we don't believe he killed himself.
I mean, that's fine. And then they should come out and they should say that. And then they should say who's covering that up. Because
okay, but this is what, Ben, they can't. I mean, there are a lot of people who say they can't, right? They can't because let's look at what the administration is saying right now. They don't want to be the one to cross Trump. Look, my position is let's show us all the evidence so we can come to our own conclusions.
I have names of the people. So I agree with you. That's fine. But in the absence of that, I have the names of the people who are making the claim that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself, and that the most gross, and sort of extreme of the conspiracy theories, just don't even call them conspiracy theories, the most sort of, extreme version of the theory is not true. I have names of the people who are claiming that. Okay, they are all in the administration. And this is my point. If other people want to make those claims that are counter to that, then they should provide evidence, or at least put their names on it so we can question them about that as well, because otherwise we're just in the realm of pure speculation. And frankly, I just don't find that useful. I would love more useful information. This is why I'm angry at Pam Bondi. I think there should be all the useful information possible. But the same thing holds true for people who are making claims on the other side. Otherwise, I can claim that he was working for a cadre of space aliens who are blackmailing high-profile Americans in order to protect from a future invasion. And there's just about as much evidence for that as many of the claims that are being made on the other side.
All right, well, let's talk
claim
about that.
That is made requires evidence. Any claim that's being made requires actual evidence. And at the very least, in the absence of evidence, the credible names of the people that I can either trust or not trust, ranging from, again, the President of the United States and Vice President to the head of the FBI, the AG, and the Deputy Head of the FBI.
Well, I think it's very hard to say those people need to come out and put their names on these claims when they're working for an administration, this one and the one before, that didn't want that to come out. You're asking somebody to countermand the people they work for.
Okay, all right. So you get the point, I think, that Ben Shapiro is saying, I have all these sources. Megyn Kelly is saying, well, I have all these sources. Now, let me just tell you why they're not saying who these folks are. Okay, now, a little bit later in the video, Ben Shapiro says, well, it's the President of the United States. It's Pam Bondi. It's Dan Bongino. It's Kash Patel. All right, those aren't sources per se. Those aren't people that are trying to verify the validity of claims on either side. Now, Megyn Kelly, she says, well, I've got sources too. But the reason why they're not saying who it is, either A, it would put that person in jeopardy. They've leaked it for whatever reason. They talk to Megyn Kelly on the condition of anonymity. I do that sometimes. Not very often, but you'll hear me say on the program that sources have told Cowboy state politics X, Y, and Z. But I try not to do that very often because I don't think that you like it. But sometimes, in order to get people to talk to you, you have to agree to protect their anonymity, right, wrong, or indifferent. But what you see from that video is there are claims being made on both sides. And I don't think that you can legitimize either one of them, because this group of people is saying one thing, they're high up in the government. This group of people over here is saying another, and they're high up in the government. So I don't know that you're getting any sort of validity at all. But let's go to the piece in the Daily Caller that alerted me to this. And it says, and I quote, public outcry over deceased pedophile Jeffrey Epstein reignited after the Department of Justice quietly released a memo saying the FBI found no evidence of a, quote, client list or foul play in his death. On the Megyn Kelly show, okay, we just watched a little piece of that. Her and Shapiro went back and forth on it. And the video goes on for another couple of minutes. Let's see here. I have my own sources. That's fine. Shapiro says they should come out and they should say that. All right, well, whatever. No credible journalist, at least on this story, is going to out who their sources are. And even if they did, those people would never talk to them again. But following the DOJ memo, first obtained by Axios on July 6th, questions began circulating about Epstein's case. The FBI released about 10 hours of raw enhanced footage from outside, raw and enhanced. So that's in quotation marks. And now I don't know what raw enhanced video is, because by definition, if you've monkeyed with it, it's not raw anymore. Like if you've adjusted the audio, like sometimes I do, on the good example of that is the Bo Beitman audio. Well, parts of it were a little bit muffled, so I amplified what was said so you could hear it. And so that piece of audio that I played, it's not raw anymore, and neither is this. If it's enhanced, it means it's not raw. So again, let's just get the terminology right. We're dealing with something here that we have to be specific about, and we have to be able to, say, okay, it's X, Y, and Z. And if we have any tampering with anything in it, it raises questions on either side. All right, so that pretty much covers the whole Epstein thing. Personally, I think it's kind of a distraction. We were promised transparency, and sometimes little things tend to blow up into bigger, huge issues if they're not addressed properly. But the question is it the most important scandal? Because it is overshadowing a lot of things. And after the break, we're going to talk about the auto pen thing, which I'm sure all of you have heard about. And we'll see, okay, which one of these scandals is the biggest one? So we're going to do that after the break. But first, an absolutely outrageous profit timeout. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live, doing what I was born to do with talent given to me by God himself. And let me tell you, my friends, I am eternally grateful for all of the gifts that God has given me, because without him, I wouldn't be able to do, none of us would be able to do what we do. And, everything for the glory of God. And you just absolutely have to thank him for everything that you're doing, that you're able to do, and all of the gifts that you've been given. Even if you don't even understand them, which happens a lot of the time. Well, before the break, we were talking about the Epstein scandal. Personally, I think it's kind of a distraction. I want transparency from the government, but I've been watching politicians for so long that I kind of expect that I'm going to be disappointed. And the truth is, you don't want your guy to disappoint you, but they're a politician, and even if the politician's name is Donald Trump, eventually they're going to disappoint you about something. I know that sounds a little bit cynical, but we just got to be real, right? There's a lot of different things that are going on, and so let me give you a great example. So Donald Trump, during his first term, was told that he was going to declassify everything that had to do with JFK. And he was very adamant about it. And then, when it came time to do it, he went, I think he was sitting in the Oval Office. I can't remember. I'll have to look this up. But he came out and he said, you don't really know what's in there. I do. And we don't really want this, released right now. We don't think it's a good idea. And he didn't do it. Well, then, there was an attempt on his life. God saved him from a bullet. And, he has a little bit different view of assassination attempts, and he released it. But, think about it. During his first term, he said, yep, we're going to absolutely do this. And then he didn't do it. So, you got to take all these things into context. But secondly, what sort of influence does this scandal have on everything else? There's a lot of different things that are going on in our country right now. And I just question how important this one little incident is. And, I mean, there's folks on the other side of this thing that say this is extraordinarily important, that it goes to the very foundations of the trust and credibility of this administration. And I don't disagree that it absolutely is evidence of, okay, well, maybe we don't trust everything that comes out of them, which, by the way, they're politicians and you shouldn't trust them anyway. But, so I don't know exactly how big this scandal is. But let me give you another one. And, this is one of them that I think goes to the very foundation of our republic. And if you don't, well, I just don't think that you understand the power that the Constitution gives to the president and how that's authorized and how it's executed. Because, and I've got a piece of sound I'm going to play for you here in just a little bit. It was from a congressional hearing when they're talking about the auto pen scandal, and it's a guy from the Government Accountability Project, I think that's what it is, and he goes through what they found, and I think it's important to listen to it. But let me just go first to the Blaze in a piece entitled "Trump Isn't Hiding a Client List; He's Too Busy Running the Country, Saving the Country, rather." Quote, President Trump's official repudiation of the Jeffrey Epstein conspiracy theory has caused considerable consternation and conflict on the right. But with that comes an opportunity to grow. MAGA's enduring fascination with this supermarket tabloid story represents, and clearly the author is not, it doesn't think that the Epstein story is that big. So just take that into consideration. Represents one of the weaknesses of populism, namely a tendency toward histrionic and grandiose speculation that leads to nowhere productive. To be blunt, the Epstein saga was a waste of bandwidth, and now Trump and his team have ripped off the bandage. We can move on to bigger things and more compelling issues like those on which Trump campaigned about. Neither Trump nor his cabinet is at fault for failing to satiate those who were never going to accept anything less than a conclusion that Epstein was part of some grandiose conspiracy. Now, I think that is absolutely true, that we're in a place where the folks that are beating the drum on this Epstein thing, they are not going to be satisfied unless they're told, yep, Epstein was part of some sort of grandiose conspiracy. Unless, and even if it comes out and say, no, he was just a really prolific pedophile. And that was it. And there's really no evidence. And I don't know which one of those is true, but I just don't think it's that big. So the Blaze, at least this author, is saying, hey, this isn't this big a deal. We should move on. Now, there is another issue, the auto pen that I mentioned, that I personally think is far more important, and it is getting overshadowed in some ways by this whole Epstein business. From the Federalist, staff used AutoPen to change pardons after Biden allegedly approved them. And, on XM radio yesterday, as we were traveling the vast open range of Wyoming, we listened to a lot of radio. But it turns out that Biden didn't sign any of those. That's the first point. Second, that he didn't approve them individually. That's a big problem. And third, according to the Federalist, they were changed after he allegedly approved them. And I quote, a report from the New York Times indicates that former President Joe Biden staffers used the AutoPen to sign off on changes to pardons without notifying the president. That might lead one to believe that many someones perhaps, has usurped the power of the presidency. And in this audio, you know what? I think we're just going to go ahead and play this audio clip. It's pretty long, but it's very important that you listen to it because he's talking about how the Constitution gives power to the presidency and how that signature is the guarantor of our republic. So let's just go ahead and listen to it. I mean, it's pretty long, but we'll listen to it, then we'll come back and we'll talk about it. Let's see here. Here we go.
Thank you for the opportunity to testify this morning about how the cover-up of President Biden's mental decline endangered America's national security and undermined the Constitution. The U.S. Constitution vests executive power in a single person, the president. At the founding, the president exercised the executive power through only a small group of trusted advisors and personnel. In fact, President Washington had a 4-member cabinet. Today, the president directs a Leviathan executive branch with 15 cabinet departments and at least 4 million full-time executive branch employees. The executive branch proliferation has a single source of democratic legitimacy, that by order of U.S. Constitution's Article 2, the president is both elected by the American people and vested with the executive power, all of it. Traditionally, the president takes positive actions and authenticates those actions through his signature. His signature is required for the most significant actions he may undertake: to sign an executive order, to take any action invested in him by the Constitution, as in granting a pardon, and to take the most important action of all, to sign a bill into law. In all these cases, the president's
hold on just a second. All right, so the executive power of the presidency is vested in the signature of the president. Now, I want to take you back to the Barack Obama administration, and if I believe it was the Patriot Act, but it had to be updated or reauthorized. That's the term I was looking for. Well, President Obama was not in the country. He was on Air Force One traveling somewhere, and so he was not available to sign that bill. And so the administration publicly announced that they were using the auto pen to sign the reauthorization of the Patriot Act. But they were very open about it. I mean, there's a lot of things that you could blame on the Obama administration about not being open. But this one, they were. I remember it specifically because they came out and said, okay, we have to use the auto pen to do this, but it's entirely legal. And then, the talking heads on TV, they debated back and forth whether using the auto pen to execute and that's something we should talk about, but whether it was legal to execute that document with the signature. So think about any documents that you've signed, loan papers, for example. When you sign that document, you are executing the document, which means by your signature, that document is now in effect. And the same holds true for the president. But the documents that he signs, I'm not saying that they're any more important than you signing loan papers for your house. Certainly that's important. But we're talking on a much larger scale. So the president's signature validates any of those documents. So let's go ahead and listen to a little bit more of what he says, because he's about to get into all the use of the auto pen. So let's go ahead and listen, and then we'll come back.
Signature is itself the protection of democratic principle. When the president signs, he communicates his assent and endorsement of the action he takes. The auto pen is a device that signs the president's signature to a document. The oversight project, of which I am a board member, has discovered that the Biden White House deployed an auto pen to affix President Biden's signature to pardons, prison commutations, executive orders, and presidential proclamations. The Oversight Project's research has found that the Biden White House first deployed the auto pen to affix President Biden's signature to a proclamation on day 5 of his administration, and that there were at least 3 different auto pen signatures in use.
All right. So they started using this on day 5. You remember all of that huge stack of executive orders that they made him sit there and sign? All right. So that was a tremendous amount. But on day 5, they were using the auto pen. So what else? I mean, they made this big production of Joe Biden signing all things. Same thing President Trump did. He had this big, I guess, rally at which he just started signing documents, and it was in front of everybody. But the Biden administration, well, they started using the auto pen on day 5. Now we're all pretty sure that Biden's mental capacity declined precipitously, when from day 1 until the end of year 4. But if they were using it on day 5, it kind of means that he wasn't signing all of these things. But let's continue.
President Biden's tenure in the White House. In June 2022, the Biden White House began deploying the auto pen to sign clemency warrants and executive orders. Auto pen use skyrocketed from there. We found that of the 51 clemency warrants issued during the Biden presidency, over half, 32 in total, were signed with an auto pen. And these include some of the most controversial acts of clemency of the Biden presidency, including death row commutations and the preemptive pardons of members of the Biden family, Dr. Anthony Fauci, General Mark Milley, and more that were issued in the final days of the Biden presidency. We reviewed President Biden's schedule and his publicly available media, and were unable to find any record of President Biden's personally approving the actions, such as a statement issued by the president himself to reporters. In addition, we found that the Biden White House used the auto pen to affix President Biden's signature to clemency warrants and executive orders while the president himself was in Washington, D.C. for at least some of that day, and thus was presumably available to sign important executive actions.
Okay, so did you hear that? That he was in the White House and they were still using the auto pen, which, I mean, I don't know why you could do that. The guy was kind of out of his mind anyway. Certainly, you could walk into his office and say, yeah, Mr. President, I need your signature on this, 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 and this. I used to work for a big construction company, and I was the guy that did all the estimating for them. And so lots of contracts and letters and all sorts of things came off of my desk. And I would just, stack them all up. I didn't want to have to go to the boss's office over and over and over, nor did he really have time for that. And so I would just say, okay, I've got, these 5 or 6 things that I need his signature on. And I just take them all in there at once and we'd go through them. All right, this is a letter to this client. I need your signature on it. Please review it. And if it's good, sign it. And that's the process we would use. So I have to assume that was that was a similar process that was happening in the Biden White House, or in any White House for that matter. But the truth is, it really wasn't. That was not the process, because you heard on day 5 they had already put the auto pen in there and they were good to go. So I don't think that throughout the entirety of the Biden White House that they were actually using his signature, that it was only for, the irony being that the auto pen, I mean, the point of it is either A, in extreme circumstances, or B, if there's a whole tranche of things, pictures or letters or whatever, that it's just super repetitive. I happen to have a picture of Donald Trump that, it does have an actual pen signature on it, but I'm pretty sure it was signed with an auto pen. But those sorts of things. But in the Biden White House, that wasn't the case. They use the auto pen for everything. Let's listen to a little bit more of this.
Finally, we found multiple days where President Biden wet signed a bill into law, but used an auto pen to issue an executive order or for other important executive actions. The Biden White House's widespread use of an auto pen to affix President Biden's signatures to documents that exercise executive powers belonging solely to the president poses significant constitutional, legal, and practical considerations. Once the president's signature is copied and loaded into the auto pen, the machine can sign documents as the president himself would. To be blunt, by using the auto pen, anyone can sign documents as the president himself. Now, to be clear, I'm not here today to suggest that the auto pen is bad. It's just technology. I'm here today because of questions concerning President Biden's capacity and whether the auto pen was used to usurp presidential power or to conceal the president's decline.
Okay, so there you have it. That's the whole point of this entire thing. That was the auto pen used to take over, to take over the U.S. presidency. Was that the case? I mean, was there some staffer? Was it the chief of staff? I read another report over the weekend that it was the president's chief of staff that was directing the use of the auto pen. So the point here is they used it so much that it kind of leads you to believe that it was not the president of the United States that was running the country, which, this is, how many movies have been made about this? The Manchurian Candidate, guy gets elected, somebody else is controlling. I mean, there have been so many movies made about this. And what about the Trump-Russia collusion controversy? The hoax that was done there. The whole point of it was, Russia helped get him elected, and so Russia's going to be in charge of the presidency. That was the whole point behind that. That was what the left was trying to lead you to believe. This is exactly the case. So then the question becomes, which is the bigger scandal? One, all right, so it does have to do with transparency. We were told that we were going to get something and we didn't get it. And so, it's important. I'm not going to take away from that. However, is it more important than the auto pen scandal? And I think that we can all agree that if it wasn't and even whatever you think about the 2020 election, I happen to think that it was absolutely rigged, but whatever. Eventually, he became the duly installed maybe that's a better way to put it, president of the United States. And if there is a possibility that he was not in control of the office of the presidency, my friends, I think that this is a matter of maybe there's a little bit of misdirection going on here. And we should really kind of refocus our sights on what's important, because I don't really think when you compare the two that the Epstein thing is more important, because I don't really think that it is. So there's another piece by Anthony Fauci, and it relates to this AutoPen scandal. And if you see me looking at the clock, I'm trying to make sure that I'm not going over, because Chris Adamo, and if you're listening to if you're watching the program right now, Chris Adamo, he's the author of the book Rules for Defeating Radicals. He's really a fascinating guy to talk to. So we're going to talk to him at the top of the hour. Make sure that you don't miss it. It's going to be a fascinating conversation. We're going to start out in a place where I know that you totally don't expect, but it'll be a great discussion, so you don't want to miss it. Anyway, there's this piece from the Federalist. Fauci pardon was greenlit by aide with no proof that Biden approved it. Now, again, this is just one example out of the hundreds, if not thousands of times the AutoPen was used. Listen to this. Now, the American people deserve two investigations, one into the decision makers behind the AutoPen, and the other probing Fauci's havoc-wreaking role in the origins of and the response to COVID-19. Dr. Anthony Fauci is at the root of almost all of the government-inflicted suffering that happened in the United States during the plandemic. He has never been charged with a crime. Nonetheless, on former President Biden's last day in office, he received a pardon designed to blunt the results of any future COVID investigation by the Donald Trump administration. But Biden did not personally sign Fauci's pardon. An AutoPen managed by his White House staff secretary, Stephanie Feldman, did. And a New York Times piece by the Washington reporters Charlie Savage and Tyler Pager shows there is no proof Biden even knew about Fauci's pardon or the specifics of most of his other pardons. According to the Times, emails indicate that Feldman wanted written confirmation of Biden's purported verbal approvals before producing an AutoPen signed pardon document. So aides to Biden's senior advisors emailed her so-called blurbs with instructions. The aides were told by senior advisors what to include in these blurbs. The aides were not in the room when Biden made the alleged pardon decisions. Now, the pardon directions had a broken chain of custody. Also, this is lovely, leaving ample opportunity for advisors or the aides to change or add to what Biden said if they met with Biden at all, because there's no proof that they actually did. And so this is just further evidence that there was somebody else in charge of the AutoPen, and thus there was somebody else running the office of the president. It's fascinating that Biden didn't even put an internal signature on a list of pardons, showing the executive approved them. That is pretty standard in offices where many hands touch a piece of work. It is stupefying that something of such intense interest to every American who lived through COVID was not carefully logged in writing at every stage for the national record. The New York Times says it conducted a 10-minute phone interview with Biden. Strange that the retired president could not spare more time, because 10 minutes is hardly enough time to learn everything there is to know about the 4,245 acts of clemency that were issued in Biden's name. Over 4,000 times. Just clemency, right? That's pardons. That's all of them. So there's over 4,000 times that Biden didn't sign a document. Quote, Mr. Biden said he shielded those people along with members of his family so they would not have to run up large legal bills from politically motivated investigations by the Trump Justice Department. Quote, everybody knows how vindictive he is, so we knew that they'd do what they're doing now, Biden said. I consciously made all those decisions, according to the New York Times piece. But it's too bad that the Times did not probe further. It would be interesting to hear Biden explain his rationale for why Fauci's pardon goes back 7 years before Biden was president to January 1st of 2014. Even before Donald Trump was president, even before the pandemic. Why is that? Preemptively absolving him of vague crimes he has not yet been formally charged for. The January 19th pardon covers, quote, any offenses against the United States which he may have committed or taken part in during the period of January 1st, 2014 through the date of this pardon, arising from or in any manner related to his service as director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, as a member of the White House Coronavirus Task Force or the White House COVID-19 response team, or as chief medical advisor to the president. And so, my friends, I think that the question of whether or not the presidency was usurped by a group of people inside Biden's White House is far more important than the Epstein, I don't know, scandal, conspiracy, whatever you want to call it. And unfortunately, and I don't like this any more than you do, but my opinion is, all right, I didn't get what I wanted, Epstein. I wanted to know exactly what happened there. I wanted to know how he died. I want to see who's on that client list. And there's the other part that we're dealing with pedophiles here. This is pretty bad, and I don't want to minimize any of that. But when you, when you weigh it against the office of the presidency, I think that it pales in comparison, as horrible as it actually is. And so don't take this whole segment to mean that I'm brushing aside the importance of any of these things. I'm not. I think it's absolutely horrible. Frankly, I wish that Jeffrey Epstein would have lived long enough so that we could punish him properly and so that he could, die a pleasant death in an electric chair. We don't have the death penalty for pedophilia, though I think that we probably should have. But I'm very disappointed that we did not get that opportunity, that he did not have justice done, that he was able to, allegedly take his own life or not, as the case may be. But I don't think that it exceeds the importance of the auto pen scandal. Now, it's possible that we can deal with these two things at the same time. That we can fight to have transparency with Epstein, though I question whether or not that's going to happen, much to the detriment of the Donald Trump presidency. But we can focus on these two things at the same time. I just don't want one to overshadow the other. And I think that if we allow it to, exceed the scrutiny of this auto pen thing, I think we're doing all of ourselves a big disservice. I would like to see some regulations, though. I mean, the president can pretty much do whatever he wants, but I'd like to see some regulations surrounding the use of the auto pen. Some sort of system put in place to where we, the little people, you and me, can verify, okay, well, this one, yeah, this time it was authorized, over there, not so much. I don't know how you do that, but again, my friends, don't let one overshadow the other, and hopefully we can have a resolution on both of them. But it's somebody taking over the White House who was not elected seems like kind of a big deal to me, and I think we don't want to lose sight of it. So we've got about 10 minutes left before we talk to Chris Adamo. I've got one more little piece. And this one, actually, I don't think it's little at all. The Supreme Court came out with a ruling on the Department of Education firings. Now, this the ruling doesn't really greenlight the complete dismantling of the Department of Education, though I think that it goes a long ways, because the Supreme Court has ruled in a party line ruling that those firings can continue. This is from the Blaze, an article entitled "Supreme Court Grants Massive Victory to Trump Administration on Cutting Down the Department of Education." And I quote, "The Trump administration chalked up another massive victory with the U.S. Supreme Court when it was allowed to continue plans to significantly cut down the size of the Department of Education. The Department of Education isn't in the Constitution. It's not the proper role of government. It should be left up to the states. The feds need to get the heck out of it. And I'm totally in favor with just taking an axe to the Department of Education." The judgment fell along ideological lines, with 6 justices in favor of and 3 voting against. The majority did not explain the ruling. Quote, "We're just simply not doing something right. I don't think that education is handled from a bureaucratic position in Washington, D.C. The majority is either," and this is from the dissent, "the majority is either willfully blind or the implications of its ruling or naive," wrote Justice Sonia Sotomayor in her dissent. "But either way, the threat to our Constitution's separation of powers is great." Okay. You can't have a separation of powers on something that is not the proper role of government, nor is the Department of education outside the purview of the president. It's another one of those things that's in the executive branch, which, of course, the president is the top dog in that department. President Donald Trump had previously announced his intention to shut down the Department of Education by firing many employees and transferring many of the department's functions to other agencies. Critics of the administration say the executive branch is overstepping its authority and usurping the powers of the legislative branch. Now, this is the part of the argument where the legislature, that is Congress, created the Department of Education. And so, yeah, I mean, there's legitimate questions whether or not the president can do away with it. I personally think that he can, but maybe not completely abolish it, but cut it down to where it's completely ineffective. Let's see here. Solicitor General John Sauer argued to the Supreme Court that the Department of Education officials had determined they could carry out the agency's, quote, statutorily mandated functions with a pared-down staff, and that many discretionary functions are better left to the states, end quote. I have long maintained, my friends, that the best gift that you could give your children would be to pull them out of the public education system. We have, as a country, as a state, we have absolutely failed our children when it comes to educating them. That's not the government's role. That's your job, by the way. And, you know, when your test scores are that less than half of 8th graders come out of Wyoming schools being able to read at a proficient or higher level, that's an absolute failure. And everything we hear from education officials, at least in the state of Wyoming, is, well, our reading proficiency improved. Well, okay, but you still stunk. I mean, you had a 45% success rate, and so what if you improved it to 60? You're still failing. The point is, my friends, is that parents should be able to choose how to educate their children. Now, I'm not in favor of that ESA bill that was passed in the legislature. I like it in concept, but they added the universal pre-K to it, which I think damages the entire bill. It creates a whole nother entitlement, a whole nother branch of state government. And so I think that what we should do is educate our children ourselves and not let the government in there. I mean, if you put your kid through a government school, what are you going to end up with? A little government drone, one that doesn't really believe in the values that you taught them when they were growing up. And so, I mean, I think that absolutely we should dismantle the Department of Education. That's better left up to the states. And frankly, I don't think the state should be directing it either. I think you should leave it to the localities and let your local school boards educate children how they ought to be educated. And I don't see any logical argument as to why. You might be able to say, well, you know, some parents can't, don't have the time. Well, sorry, you made that choice when you had children. And, raising children takes sacrifices, and the best thing you can do for your kids is educate them themselves. So grow up, grow a pair, do your job, educate your kids. Don't rely on the government to do it because, quite frankly, they're going to do a bad job. And so, I mean, that's just the long and the short of that one, my friends. Let's see here. Got a few minutes left. The Communist News Network. I've got a piece that they still have not moved off the whole, like, everything is racism. I've got a little soundbite here from Anna Navarro. Listen to this. I mean, this will just tell you where the Democrat Party is right now. Check this out. It's pretty long, but I'm only going to play a little bit of it because we're going to go to a break and then come back with Chris Adamo. So here's that little piece.
I don't know who he is talking about. Look, there's certainly been a lot of finger pointing and infighting, and I get frustrated when I hear Democrats talk about, what you did wrong, what you did wrong. I want to relitigate things that don't get you to the point of how do you defeat Donald Trump. But I actually think, having been at the No Kings protests with a lot of Democrats, last month, a few weeks ago, there were protests in thousands of cities, millions of people out there protesting in small cities and big cities, small protests and huge protests, defying the fear, defying the reign of terror and retribution that Donald Trump is trying to impose on America. And so I think people are doing it. I don't know that this idea of let's find a messiah that leads Democrats out of the wilderness is going to work. I think he's right on that. But I see daily people rising up, amplifying the abuses that are happening under this administration and fighting back in their own ways, whether it's on social media, whether it's showing up in a protest, whether it's showing up to vote in some of these special elections. I see them doing it. Also, I want to respond to you saying that I was hyperbolic when I talked about a reign of terror.
Because that is hyperbolic.
No, it might be hyperbolic for you as a white man.
Oh, okay.
It's certainly not hyperbolic for me as a Latino. No, I'm not being racist.
It's incredible to dismiss my opinion for being a white man.
No, I'm not dismissing your opinion.
Okay,
I am
all
telling you.
right. But you get the point. That just about everything the left does is all about racism. It's still about racism, and they're not backing off of it at all. I mean, what else are you going to expect from the radical left? And the truth is that you know what? That's all you're going to get from them. And so anyway, my friends, let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we're going to visit with Christopher Adamo, the author of the book, Rules for Defeating Radicals. So we're going to do that in just a second. When we come back, something completely different. But first, an absolutely outrageous profit timeout.
Ever since gold backing was removed from the dollar, the value has dropped significantly over the past few decades. Experts say this is one of the main reasons goods are more expensive and your savings are worth less each year. How would you know how many dollars to save for retirement if the valuation of the dollar changes over time? Would you work all week for that $20 gold piece? Let's look at the valuation of this coin from the 1970s to today. When President Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, this coin traded for about $275. Today, it trades for about $14,000. Buying and holding rare coins using only a fraction of your portfolio is our suggested way to save for the future. Call U.S. Coin Capital at 1-800-878-2646 to get your free United States Gold and Silver Buyer's Guide.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Welcome to Lessons in Civility by Morton Buildings. Gentlemen, is your garage completely jam-packed full of all of your unnecessary crap, and your lovely wife has been on your tail, nagging you nonstop to clean it out? It's not because she just wants to incessantly irritate you. Chivalry dictates that you should clear out a space so she can park her car inside and you don't end up sleeping on the couch anymore. To do that, contact Nick and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. Not only are they the experts in metal building construction, they're also skilled at keeping you out of the doghouse. One more time. Their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out at their website, mortonbuildings.com. This has been Lessons in Civility from Morton Buildings. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics, live on YouTube, on X, on Rumble, on Facebook, pretty much everywhere. I mean, it's really hard to miss Cowboy state politics, and frankly, why would you want to? Welcome back to the program, my friends. I'm joined on the phone by a friend of the program, author of the book Rules for Defeating Radicals, Mr. Chris Adamo. Chris, how are you this morning?
Hello, sir. I'm really, really happy to be here. And I'm going to add to that little intro you gave. I'm also a Wyoming native, though I'm not presently living in Wyoming. But
yeah, what's wrong with you? Why'd you leave this place?
There are times when I get so homesick. It is such a wonderful place. But at the moment, I feel like God has called us here, so we're going to pursue our missions as Christians in the heartland in Missouri.
Fair enough. Now, do you? So you live in Missouri. For some reason, I thought you were living in Minnesota, and I was going to make fun of you for about having almost having an Islamist mayor. But we'll get to that in just a little bit. The reason I wanted to have you on the show is you had one of your posts on X picked up by Breitbart News, and I saw it this morning. And let's see your image. And of course, you can't see this because you're on the phone, but I'll go ahead and throw it up for all of our viewers. But why don't you tell us what you were responding to?
Yeah, it had to do with the whole Chip and Joanna Gaines thing, and just a little background in case people aren't familiar with this. They ran for a long time. They've run this very Christian, family-oriented program, this channel. They're known for fixer-uppers. They're on HGTV back when. They took a strong stand for traditional marriage and things like that, caught a lot of flack for it. All of a sudden, they're putting out a program, a reality program on families in some sort of fixer-upper situations. And one of their, quote, families are these two homosexual men, and they have young men that they've adopted. And so all of a sudden, this is part of what they're calling families. They've totally, completely gone over to the opposition, to the anti-Christian side. They're trying, like every time that the sinners go out there, they don't come out and say, "Yeah, I'm a sinner." They're going to try and sugarcoat it as this is family. This is just a utopian family, and they got called out on it. And of course, when the anti-Christian crowd, and unfortunately that's where they fit in right now, when they get called out on these things, the first thing they do is they accuse you of judging.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the irony of that accusation in itself. If judging is universally bad, then their accusation against you is the very thing that they're saying that you shouldn't be doing. And so, I put up a post to this effect.
Yeah, and I just threw it back up there, by the way.
Calling sin is not judging. Now, if I get out and I say, well, God's going to strike them down with lightning this very day and things like that, then I'm trying to judge, I'm trying to condemn and things like that. But saying that they are wrong and that they are horribly wrong and that it's actually going to cause all kinds of evil to advance when they do things like this, especially having claimed to be such great Christians in the past, that's wrong. And it needs to be called wrong, and it needs to be called evil.
I agree. Now, let me just read the post by this Chip Gaines fellow, and I don't watch HGTV, and I don't watch all these fixer-upper shows, though, on occasion, the lovely Christine and I are both working on something, and we just throw something on the TV just for background noise, but I don't really pay attention to it. But this is what this Chip Gaines fellow says. Quote, talk, ask questions, listen, maybe even learn. Too much to ask modern American Christian culture. Judge first, understand later, never. It's a sad Sunday when non-believers who have never been confronted with hate or vitriol until they are introduced to, quote, to a modern American Christian. And this is the point that I wanted to talk about with you, because there's this idea that I guess there's modern Christianity. What the heck is that? I mean, I've never even heard about that before. There's one book, and as far as I know, nobody's written a sequel to it.
We could go back to the book of we could go back to the Old Testament, look at Elijah, and how the goal was to isolate Elijah. This is the strategy of the enemy typically, and boy, I'd love to talk about how it's played out throughout the last 100 years. But the idea is that there are real Christians, and this according to Chip Gaines, there are real Christians, And then there's modern American Christians. Those are bad people. Those are bad people because they're saying certain things are right and wrong. Okay, now again, the irony being that he's saying that they're wrong, so it's okay for him to say that. However, what you've got to do is look at this in the context of, well, what is and isn't right and wrong according to the Word of God. Isaiah 5:20 probably should be one of the most quoted verses in 2025 because he says, woe unto those who call good evil and evil good.
Yes.
Okay, that is what the anti-Christian leftist counterculture does now. It's everything that's actually virtuous and Christian. That's judgmental. That's narrow-minded. That's toxic. That's that's hateful. Everything that promotes perversion. Well, you got to love that. You got to love those people. Now, here's the key, and it's like a little tiny sticking point, but it's actually huge. Is who defines love? Okay, we have a worldly love that says that if two people want to engage in perversion, that's love.
No,
if
it's
you
not.
want to say that they shouldn't be doing that, that's hate. Okay, now they've redefined love. The Bible is very clear on what is love. God is love. If God is love, you can't redefine love according to terms that go directly, diametrically in opposition to what God says. You can't define right and wrong in reverse. If you do that, woe unto you for that.
Well, and a lot of what I see, and I think, I've had lots of discussions with our pastor, former Representative Mark Jennings about this, that there are a lot of denominations now, like whole denominations, that, have tried to redefine what the Bible says love is, like you say, and are completely accepting of things that are absolutely diametrically opposed to what's in the Bible. Now, it is absolutely true, if you, and this is kind of a hard thing for I think a lot of people to get their hands around or their head around. Love the sinner, hate the sin. So the question is, if Jesus were to come upon this couple, of course he loves them, but he's still going to say, what you're doing is sinful and it's wrong. And I think that Christians, across the world, definitely across the U.S., definitely across the world, misinterpret that passage, judge not lest ye be judged. Well, the judgment is just what you describe. It's the, whatever God decides is going to happen to you. But we're and this is, I love the way that my pastor puts this, that we are absolutely actually commanded to be fruit inspectors, right? We don't get to say, we don't get to say what the end result is, but we do get to say, hey man, you're kind of going astray here. This is what the Bible says. Still love you, but you might want to change what you're doing in your life.
There is such a thing as right and wrong, and the Scripture is full of it. Okay, you can go through again Jesus, what he said, right and wrong. He defined right and wrong. You can go through the epistles of Paul and the other apostles, and all throughout it, they're saying, do this thing here because this is a good thing. Don't do that thing there because that's evil. And if you do that thing there, it may lead unto death. Let's take one of the best examples, and again, the leftists love to selectively quote this incident because they think they can use it to justify themselves.
Right.
And by the way, notice I said the leftists because this is ultimately political. Okay, so when Jesus is talking to the adulteress, and he says, neither do I condemn you. Okay, and he loves her. She's caught in the act of adultery. He's not going to condemn her. He loves her. He wants her to be redeemed. What is the other thing that he says that people don't quote? He says, go and sin no more. So in other words, it's totally understood between Jesus and this adulteress that what she was doing was wrong. Stop doing it. Now, at that point, we don't know what the conversation was, but I'll guarantee you at that point, if she had said, my body, my choice, the conversation would have gone much differently. And you would have heard a severe rebuke and admonition from Jesus.
Absolutely.
The point is that she was actually facing execution at that point, and she was humble enough. She knew that she had sinned, and so all he had to say is go and sin no more. When he said, neither do I condemn you, he changed her circumstances. When he said, go and sin no more, he changed her life.
Yes.
That was the most loving thing he could say to her.
Yes.
Elsewhere, John the Baptist says, "You brood of vipers, who warned you to flee from the wrath to come?" That he was speaking to people who needed a cold shower, an awakening slap in the face because of where they were at spiritually. That was the most loving thing he could tell them. Love is not defined by the world, because the world that says that if it feels good, do it, that world is what leads lives to destruction.
Yes, absolutely. And here's the thing that always gets me. It's all you got to do is read the Bible. But the problem is that a lot of folks, they don't want to hear the truth about what they're doing, and we're in a culture that is instant gratification, and we're told by many of these denominations that whatever feels good is good. And the truth is that a lot of the things that feel good are not good, and they're specifically, that the Bible specifically says you shouldn't be doing those. So let me ask you this: so did you get any sort of notice or anything that Breitbart used your post on X, or did that come as a surprise to you?
Yeah, I got a notice from David Iverson this morning, and my whole day has been turned upside down by that. Yeah, I had no idea about that. I guess it happened yesterday, and suddenly I'm getting responses. I'm getting two very contrasting responses. I'm getting a bunch of sincere Christians out there saying, "Thank you for speaking the blunt truth." And by the way, think about this irony now. One time I get quoted on national media. And there's a typo in my post because I misspelled fashion because I was typing fast.
Well, of course there is.
However, the other response that I get from people is that, yes, I'm judgmental, or you're going to call out this stuff, but you're going to support an adulterous president, and things like this. And it's always about deflecting from the issue at hand.
Yes.
Okay. Now, nowhere have you and I ever said that we worship Donald Trump because he never sinned. Okay, that's a total deflection. It's a total rabbit trail. But this is how the enemy does it. This is why the enemy in Scripture is the name Satan means the accuser. He doesn't come out and he doesn't accuse. He doesn't point out, David, you did these things wrong today, for the purpose of making you righteous, of improving your walk with God. He does it to condemn. Okay, what's going on here with this whole Chip and Joanna situation is they're doing Isaiah 5:20. They're calling evil good, where you have this perverse relationship that's actually not just the behavior that these two homosexual men are engaging in, but the notion that they should be doing it with these kids in the household so they can help inculcate these kids into their lifestyle. Okay. That we'll call good. That's family. That's a utopian home environment.
Yeah, right.
You people that are saying this is not good for those guys to be doing it for their own redemption, their own salvation. You people saying that they should change their ways, or that these kids shouldn't be subject to this environment. You're the evil one.
Yeah. Well, I've long said that, I'm libertarian enough, and I hesitate to even use that word, but personally, you can do whatever you want behind closed doors. That's your freedom. You can make the choices that you want. Everybody has free will, but that doesn't make it right. It doesn't mean that I approve. But the other caveat I put to that is don't involve kids in it. Like children are innocent, and when we expose them to things that are, absolutely, wrong, when we know that that's not a healthy environment for children. And the easiest way that I can explain this is a political program, but the easiest way that I can explain this is we all know that the best family environment is a loving mom and a loving dad. It is not two loving dads or two loving moms or any of that. It's mom and dad, period.
And sadly these days, because they've so twisted the lexicon and everything, we have to even clarify it further than that. A loving biological male dad, a loving biological female mom who identify per their biology, not per their psychosis. But I would like, since you mentioned the political aspect of this, I would like to again go into another aspect aspect of the situation that actually does make this very political. I guarantee you, you have never had, Pastor Jennings. I can speak on behalf of him without ever having been to his church. You've never had somebody come into your church and say, "Hey, I identify as a car thief, and so therefore you need to accommodate me. If you're going to love me, you need to let me steal cars, and you need to let me teach your kids how to steal cars."
No, that would definitely not happen.
Drug dealer come in and say that same thing about drug dealing. There's two groups that are on a very, very political quest to corrupt all of societal morality to accommodate them. In 2025, the two groups are the abortionists and the homosexuals. They go under this guise of live and let live. Okay, well, first of all, you can't live and let live as an abortionist because half the people that go into abortion clinics come out dead, the babies.
Right.
So there's no live and let live to these people. What they demand is validation.
Yes.
Okay. Like you said, you do it behind closed doors. Now, I'm not going to ever approve of it. I'm not going to ever say it's not sin. But frankly, I've got other things that I'm going to try and worry about in my life. I'm not going to go peeking through your windows to see what you're doing behind closed doors. However, the live and let live is a farce. It's a ruse, because what they want you and me to say, "Oh, that's good. Well, I'm going to call evil good because that makes you feel better because you're involved in evil." And somewhere in your conscience, you know it. And you think that the only reason it's evil is because I'm saying so. And so the goal is to get me to stop saying it's evil. That's how they work this. And that's why it's never live and let live. They move into these environments and they're always trying to convert. They're always trying to proselytize for their perverse ideology. That's why these things keep happening.
Well, and Chris, I think it goes to a more fundamental level. I mean, I really think that their ultimate goal is to I'm struggling with words this morning, but to pervert what the truth is, and I mean truth with a capital T. And I really think that it all goes back to what you mentioned. If you can convince people that a man can become a woman or a woman can become a man, I mean, that's one of the fundamental things that all of us should understand, right? We all had a mommy and a daddy. I mean, that is you cannot get past that. But if you can convince people that a man can become a woman or a giraffe or a trout, then you can convince them of anything. And that's where the second thing I wanted to talk to you about this morning. But I'll tell you what. Let's just go ahead and go into it now. We've got this Zoran Mamdani guy in New York, and I think there's a definite possibility that he's going to end up being the mayor of New York. And there's also a guy who's he's running for mayor in Minneapolis, another giant city in America. And he's pretty much, I looked into him this morning, and he's pretty much a carbon copy of this Mamdani guy. And so I've long said that if you're wondering why all of these different, ostensibly disparate groups are banding together, it's because they're all for the same thing. And here's what I mean by that. And I haven't really seen that much of it recently, but for a while, you saw all the LGBT groups. They were advocating for, free Palestine. They were supporting Iran. Now, wait a minute. That one there tells you that people really aren't thinking, because if those same people were in Tehran or were in Gaza, they wouldn't be alive very long. So there's got to be another reason why they're all allied together, and I contend that it's all because they're Marxist. Is that what you're saying?
You're right on the money. You're right on target. I speak frequently on this, saying that the Islamists and the leftists, they have the same end game, they have the same tactics, and that's because they serve the same master. It's just that simple. Now they don't realize what they're serving, because the Islamists think they're serving the true God. The Marxists think that they're serving the ideological purity of their founder, Karl Marx, their leader that was going to institute utopia through collectivism. Okay, they think these things, but if you look at who they are, how they operate, and where they're going with everything, it's all about oppression. It's all about their way, or you face the gulag, or you face the pataz, the impatati, or whatever, and you face death. It's all by brute force, according to what they say. Now, the fact that they totally disagree with each other on certain issues, they can work around that at the moment, because they both think that they're actually carrying the real torch, and it's like they see themselves as allies. At some point, if they were to succeed in overthrowing all Christianity and all decency and all freedom in our culture, then they'd fight it out for supremacy. But in the meantime, yeah, everything that they have is in common, and they're going to fight for the same goal.
Yeah. Well, let me give you a piece from this one's from Reason.com. And I don't know if you've ever checked that site out, but they frequently have some pretty interesting articles. And this one is entitled, UN Report Blames Israel and Capitalism for the Conflict in Gaza. Now, the reason why I wanted to talk about this with you is a lot of these different groups are vehemently opposed to capitalism. Why?
Capitalism actually is it will result from a society that upholds basic biblical morality, in which case you are responsible for your own circumstances, and to the degree that you can help yourself and you can flourish and prosper, it's up to you to do that. Now, Christianity says if you're unable to do that because you're disabled, you have some dire circumstances, then your brothers and sisters around you reach out to help you. But it does not say that you are deserving of the property of another simply because they have more than you do. Okay, so it's you're seeing a collectivist, top-down morality, so to speak. I hate to use that word for it, versus an individual who is responsible for his own actions and reaps the consequences of the good things he does or the bad things he does. Okay, that's the contrast between the two. So yeah, all of these things are these Islamism, Marxism, socialism, which is that's just a facade over Marxism. They all have the same idea. They're all on one side of the fence.
Right. I mean, and I really do think that the goal of a lot of these groups is to destroy our Western culture and to destroy capitalism. And it's, I mean, those, and the hard part about explaining this to people is, the average person is going to look at you and say, "Oh, really? Are they really out to destroy capitalism?" Yes, they are, because capitalism is responsible for all of the wealth in our country, how charitable we are, the power of the United States, and you can't usurp the power of any of those things unless you destroy capitalism. And that's what these two guys in one in New York and one in Minneapolis are doing. Now, Chris, I want to take a quick break, and when we come back, I'm going to see if I can round up some of those sound bites from this Mom Dummy guy. And I don't know if you've heard them or not, but I really want to get your reaction to them. So we'll take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about it. We're joined by Chris Adamo, author of the book Rules for Defeating Radicals. We'll continue in a minute. It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those guys that listen to the president just a little bit too closely and now you're tired of winning? Are you getting the feeling that there's been way too many good things happening in our country and you just can't take it anymore? Well, if you are, and you think you should follow Rosie O'Donnell's example and get the heck out of Dodge, you need to call Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She'll make those foreign country living ideas a reality for you. All you have to do is call 307-699-3519, and she'll make sure some freedom-loving, red-blooded American will now live in the home that you no longer want. If you want to sell your house, or if you want to buy one that's way better than the house you have right now, give Rebecca a call. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy State Politics is only going to get stronger. This program is continuing to expand. Number 32 on the list of the 100 podcasts you should be listening to in 2025. My friends, welcome back to the program. We're joined with author of the book, Rules for Defeating Radicals, Mr. Chris Adamo. Now, Chris, I know that you wrote a book about all these Marxists and all these radicals, but I don't know if you've heard all the fantastic things that Zoran Mamdani has to say. Have you heard of any of those?
I've seen some of them, and yeah, they're what would you say, predictable?
Well, they are definitely that. But what I wanted to do is play a couple of them for you, and just get your reaction. Now, let's see here. The one I'm thinking about, they're a little bit long, but go ahead and listen to this first one, and feel free to opine about any here and there, because I think that there's this first one. There's a lot that's in there. So go ahead and take a listen to this.
What the purpose is about this entire project. It's not simply to raise class consciousness, but to win socialism. And obviously raising class consciousness is a critical part of that. But making sure that we have candidates that both understand that and are willing to put that forward at every which moment that they have, at every which opportunity that they're given. We have to continue to elect more socialists. And we have to ensure that we are unapologetic about our socialism.
Oh, what do you think about that one?
Okay. First thing I would like to do, if it's okay, is to actually backtrack just a little bit to something you said right before the break. Is when they say, and I wish I could repeat your intonation on it. It was great. Are they really trying to destroy capitalism? That's what they ask us, and the goal is to mock us in that. Okay, you think they're trying to destroy capitalism? You're just paranoid. Okay. Now, I was going to originally take it back to Alinsky and the mockery, which would take it back about 60, 70 years when he wrote his Rules for Radicals, and he talked about using mockery to shut people down.
Yes.
But really, the way you said that was so textbook. We need to take it back a lot further. You might remember this quote: "Did God really say on that day you will surely die?"
Yep.
Okay, and this is how. Guess where that came from? That came from the father of Alinsky and Marxism and everything. And I'm talking about Old Scratch himself. Okay, the point is that what they start by doing is they start by mocking you, shutting you down. In Chip Gaines' case, it was done by accusing you of judgment. In the case of these Marxists, they're gonna laugh at you for trying to call them out for what they're actually doing. And yet, in the next breath, they'll advocate what they're actually doing. But if you notice, he didn't say this New York candidate, I never pronounce his name right, Mamdani, he didn't say that we're here to advocate Islamism and communism. He said socialism. Socialism sounds a little bit nicer. We're going to be social. We're going to care about one another.
Uh-huh.
And the truth is that it's collectivism. Collectivism, Marxism, it means by force, we take from those that we think have too much and we give it to those that we don't think have enough so we can buy their loyalty. Now, the key factor of this that they always just kind of gloss over until it's too late, and their minions always fall for it, is that you can't do that by volunteerism. You can't just convince people. You know what? Dave, you need to do your fair share and just willingly fork over an extra $10,000 to the IRS this year.
Yeah, I don't think
do
so.
it by you do it by force. Okay, you pay this much taxes, or we're coming to get you. We're going to confiscate your property, and ultimately, and it does come to this. Ultimately, if you resist, we're going to use deadly force to neutralize you. Okay, so the idea that we just want people to be taken care of. What does socialism actually do? Wherever they try it, it completely destroys thriving economies. It puts the lower class into total squalor. It puts the middle class into the lower class, and the ruling elites. You may have one group who are the very effective capitalists that got rich. They'll get replaced by another set of ruling elites who are the bureaucrats. But the bottom line is you have a very you exchange freedom, where people can actually move among those different strata if they work hard and they want to succeed. All of a sudden you have an elitist class, and then you have the masses. And the masses are given what it takes to keep them subsisting. And if you try to do anything above subsisting, you become an enemy of the elites, and they'll take you out.
Well, let's just be honest about what socialism is. And, I think that you brought up a pretty salient point, that the reason this Mamdani guy uses the word socialism is just what you said, that it sounds better. We're all being social. We have a lot of socialistic programs, welfare, and I'm sure he could give you a long list of them. But in truth, socialism is just on the same road to capitalism or to communism. It's just one step before. And the only difference between socialism and communism is in socialism, the government doesn't necessarily own the means of production. And by means of production, like owning the businesses and those sorts of things. But it's huge, expansive, all-encompassing government. And I did a series of programs. Man, it's been a while since I've done one, but they're called Escape from Communism. And anytime I run into somebody that did escape from a communist country, I make it a point to sit down and interview them, and they all have the same story, that it all starts with free stuff. Everybody is going to be happy because the government
sounds good. Yep.
It's all sounds good. We're going to get free stuff. Now, let me hit you with this next soundbite, because in it, he tells you what the goal is. And let's see here. Let me get back there. Here we go. Check this one out.
But then there are also other issues that we firmly believe in, whether it's BDS, right, or whether it's the end goal of seizing the means of production, where we do not have the same level of support at this very moment. And what I want to say is that it is critical that in the way that we organize, the way that we set up our work and our priorities, that we do not leave any one issue for the other, that we do not.
So we have to make sure we're focusing on seizing the means of production. Seems to me like he wants communism, Chris.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that he used the word organizing there, because that was actually waving a giant, very red flag in the traditional sense of the word of the communists. Now, let's talk about what did Obama call himself? What does Alinsky call these groups that do this? Community organizers. Now, even that has this kind of a nice sounding thing. Community organizers. These are the people that are going to get together and maybe put in a bike trail or something really,
of course,
like that.
Why do you hate bike trails, Chris?
Exactly. I'm a bike trail hater. And the idea of organizing, yes, we're all going to try and work together. And I can show you in Scripture where we're all supposed to work together. We're all supposed to be of one accord, things like this. And yet what you find with this, and I'll take it back to Alinsky and give a little plug for my book there, is that Alinsky, he talks about these organizers as radicals. Okay, he doesn't say, he didn't title his book Rules for the Good Citizens Who Want to Make Utopia. These are rules for radicals. How does this little fringe group get together and amass enough strength? And here's the key. They don't have enough strength to take over. Okay, they don't amass 70% of the vote and actually take over by force. They amass enough strength to go in and insidiously cut down the people that are trying to stand for something better. So if they can silence those people, and unfortunately they've been very successful at it, But if they can silence the majority because they embarrass them whenever they speak, suddenly this little group of radicals actually dominates. And that's where the good news is that, yeah, we've been guilty of that, but the ball is in our court. We have the option to either A, acquiesce to that because I don't really want to be the next target of their mockery and derision, or if we stand against it, what happens is their attacks, if I'm loud about my response to their attack, I can call them out for what they are. At some point, it becomes obvious who's on which side of which issue. And from that point forward, and this again, I'm going to point back to my book. That's why you need my book, Rules for Defeating Radicals. I'll tell you how you do that. At the point that you take their attacks and instead of responding defensively, you take their attack and you spotlight the attack and say, this is what they're saying, and this is why, this is their end goal. At that point, everything after that they say to attack you, to embarrass you as a Christian or whatever, to embarrass you as a conservative, as a capitalist, everything they say suddenly spotlights not what's wrong with you, but the evil that lurks behind them. This is the lesson that our side needs to learn, because the ball is in our court and it is a winnable battle if we start by not going on the defensive when they attack us that way.
Well, after he said that, I mean, in the last soundbite I played for you, he was appearing in a web conference, I guess, for the Young Democratic Socialists of America. And this is a group that I know that for a lot of my viewers, well, maybe not my viewers, maybe not your readers, but people that are exposed to this conversation for the first time, they tend to think that, well, you know, the Socialist Party, they never really put up anybody credible. They're not going to win. But a lot of the people that you and I would consider radicals, let me give you a perfect example. Van Jones, like, he's constantly on CNN. He was a big supporter of the young socialists, Young Democratic Socialists of America group, until he came out later and he says, "Oh, no, see, that was just my radical phase." And really, and you heard it if you listen to that whole interview. There's two of them, actually. The first soundbite I played for you came from an interview, and the second one was from this Democratic Socialist web conference. But in the interview, they ask him about the means of production, and he laughs it off. Oh, well, I don't really mean that. Really, what I meant was we just need to have more social programs, you know, and they laugh it off.
There it is, sanitized again, social program. We just care about people.
Exactly right.
Yeah, that's the sheep's clothing. And once again, if they present the sheep's clothing and you call them out on it, and you, not you, Dave, because I know you have the spine to stand up to this stuff, but if the average person gets called out on that and they get a little embarrassed, and I don't really want to be the target of all the mockery and derision, and so they respond defensively and start trying to soft pedal what they said about these people, they give them cover. They give that sheep's clothing cover. And I'm going to give you one group, and again, we'll take it back to Wyoming politics, because there's so much going on in this realm. The most guilty group among me for doing that very thing are the rhinos, the Republicans in name only. And I actually added an extra chapter to my book specifically dealing with rhinos, who they are and how they operate. It's just one other fifth column of the leftists as they move in to take over, and how they end up giving a mantle of legitimacy to a lot of these things. I can mention, George W. Bush with his compassionate conservatism.
Yeah,
and,
barf.
Yeah, but see, in that he's saying, yes, we have compassionate conservatives because they're really socialists, as opposed to those uncompassionate conservatives who want people to starve in the streets. Okay, so and you've got very much the same thing down at the governor's mansion there in Cheyenne with Mark Gordon, former Democrat Mark Gordon, when they okay, in Wyoming, if I'm going to get elected, I have to call myself a Republican, but I'm going to be a good Republican because I'm going to actually talk and vote like a Democrat.
Yeah, well, and and a lot of people don't realize this. They just figure that the redcoats, the rhinos, that really, they're just Republican light. We're just not as conservative as that evil Iverson guy. Well, the reality is that many of them are, like you said, they're Democrats. Many of them are socialists. And if you look at all of the crazy social programs they vote for, and the classic one here, and I don't know why this one sticks in my head, and maybe you didn't hear about this, but for the last couple of sessions, a big issue has been the 988 hotline, the suicide hotline. And it's packaged as though, well, we have to have a hotline. We have to have people, for people who are in crisis, they have to be able to call. And that's absolutely true. I mean, I do want that. But what they don't tell you, or what they didn't say, is that there already is a 988 hotline. It's a national one. And really, what the Democrats and the Redcoats, the rhinos, were up to is creating another social program to which they could expand into all sorts of different areas. And, somewhere... I've got
it's an encroachment, absolutely.
Absolutely. And so they use this term rhino, and some of them, they accept it openly because it clothes their socialism in, hey, I'm just another one of you people. I'm just Republican light, when in reality, a lot of what they're trying to do is very socialistic. Like the classic example, one of my favorites is Kale Case, Nancy Case. The guy has tried to push through Medicaid expansion 17 times, probably more. Maybe there's one or two of them that I just didn't get a hold of. But that is Obamacare on the state level. It's a massive government program, and it really is an attempt to push us into a more socialized system. So what they do is they use the mantle of being a Republican, even though they're a rhino, to clothe their socialism and to hide it from you. And I think that you put it pretty clearly that what they're hoping is, one, that you don't notice it, and two, that even if you do notice it, you'll back down because you don't want to be exposed. And truth is, if you just call them out for who they are, and yet you just decide that you're not going to shut up, they'll back off because they know that they can't shut you up.
Yep. And just to give a little more detail to that, I identify three kinds of rhinos. There's the cowards who actually may know the right thing. They'd like to do it, but the minute they face backlash, they get scared. And there's a lot of those. They're the political pragmatists. Then you have the clueless ones that they really don't know which is right and wrong. And so they can be easily swayed one way or another. Sometimes you can reach those people just by educating them. And then you have the covert leftists. You mentioned Kale Case, a great example of that, where they actually have a hard leftist agenda. But in Wyoming, the big mistake, and I'm talking to you people at the grassroots, this is the people at the grassroots, the big mistake that has been made in Wyoming for too long is that there were two subjects that people would be concerned about. And if you got these two, if you answered these two, check these two boxes correctly, everybody left you alone. And that was the Second Amendment and the state income tax. You come out, you say, I'm a Republican and I support the Second Amendment. I own X number of guns in my gun cabinet and I oppose the state income tax. The average person on Main Street in Sheridan would say, okay, he's good, and they'd ignore it, and the guy would get away with it.
Yes.
Okay, and then he could govern like a Vermont Democrat. Now, there's been a huge awakening to that, and I thank people like Speaker Pro Tem Jeremy Haraldson and Chip Nyman, Speaker, John Baer, the leader of the Freedom Caucus, really good, outspoken conservatives who have said, we're going to pull the curtain back and show you who's who. And at that point, the rhinos do one of two things. The cowards come over to your side because they realize that that's where they can avoid the heat. The leftists double down, and the clueless ones wander around until maybe somebody educates them. The point is, we've got to identify who these people are, and then at the earliest opportunity, we've got to go out and make sure the good guys get reelected because they're going to get attacked. The people that I just mentioned, they're going to get attacked. Big money, big out-of-state money, whatever. But the ones who aren't standing, or the Mark Gordon crowd, the Kale Case crowd, you need to identify them. And here's the key: you need to make sure people never forget who they really are. Because come election season, I've always said it this way: come election season, even the worst rhinos suddenly morph into the second coming of Ronald Reagan.
Of course they do.
Too often they get away with that.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. And frankly, a lot of them, when they're pushed, when push comes to shove, they don't really want to be exposed either. They're, like you say, they're the cowards. And once you expose them and you push them out into the open, a lot of them, they'll back down. And I liken it, and just to kind of take this conversation full circle, one of my favorite chapters in the Bible is the temptation of Jesus. And it's I explained it in church the other day. I said, now the devil, he knew who he was going up against, right? It's Jesus. Okay, so the chances of him being successful are probably 25-75, right? I mean, this is a pretty tough job. And so, you got to think that he brought his A game, right? I mean, he's not messing around. He knows the only way that he might win this one is if he's very, very good and very, very lucky. Well, he doesn't win. And the last line of that chapter, and I'm probably going to misquote it, but it's basically, and the devil left to come back at an opportune time. And so,
oh boy.
Yep. To come back later, maybe when you're not expecting him. And that's what these redcoats do, is that when they're called out, when their plan is exposed or whatever, they'll slink away from it, and they'll start acting like the proper Republican that they know can get elected, and then they'll come back a little bit later and try it another way. But that's what they do, and the important thing is that we know what they're doing, which is why you wrote the book. So why don't you go ahead and tell my viewers, my listeners, where they can find your book?
Okay. First of all, real quickly, one statement on that. What you said, I'd like to just sum it up. You expose one rhino sufficiently, and 5 others who see what happened to him will join your side. And by the way, that's how the left operates to get us to cave and stuff. But if we play hardball in that one sense, I'm not saying lie about him. You expose who he really is, and all of a sudden, all the others are going to be on your team because they don't want you coming against him. Now, as to my book, it's at Amazon. Just go in there and do a search of my name, Christopher Adamo, or Rules for Defeating Radicals. And I still tell people it's a needed field manual for how our side can know who leftists are and how they operate, so we can effectively engage them.
Now, folks, if folks want an autographed copy of that book, how do they do that? Just order it from Amazon and then you send it to them, or how can you make that happen?
Oh gosh, you kind of threw a curve at me. Actually, I would have to order copies and sign them and then send them out to people. I haven't really done that.
Okay.
I did give them out to the Freedom Caucus, so they've got some. But autographed copies will be a little bit more complicated. We'll have to work on that. Maybe we'll work on that.
Here's an easy way: buy Chris's book, send it back to him. He'll sign it and then send it back to you.
We can do that, or next time I'm in Wyoming, we can arrange something.
Or maybe tell you what, I'll give you a call after the program, and maybe we can set something up and send me a couple copies, and we'll give them out or something.
Okay, yeah, we can sure do that.
All right, the book is Rules for Defeating Radicals, and it is by my friend, Mr. Christopher Adamo. Chris, thank you very much for joining today's program, and you're welcome back anytime you like, my friend.
Call me anytime. I'd love to be there. I think you're doing a great job, and you're showing how it needs to be done. I hope we see this elsewhere around the country. All
right. Thank you, my friend. Have a good one. That was author of the book, Rules for Defeating Radicals, Mr. Christopher Adamo. And I highly recommend the book. I've read it a couple of times. And I mean, there's a lot of this stuff Republicans intuitively know, right? The way that you fight the left is that you expose them and you show people what they're doing, and it generally works. But I do think that it's pretty important to go back and revisit how you do this every once in a while, just to kind of refresh your memory. We're not exactly in campaign season yet, but we're not that far off, and you're going to start seeing a lot of these people who really are socialists, they'll try to portray themselves as Republican light, and they're really not. They're really Democrats, and they're just hiding in the Republican Party so they can get elected. Well, that'll about do it for today's installment of the program. Have a good rest of your week, and we'll talk again tomorrow during the live program. Once again, we'll be back in the home studio. Agent 29 is off messing around somewhere. I don't even know really what he's doing. I mean, I don't understand this. He just says, "Hey, you're on your own," and leaves me high and dry. But of course, I am executing host duties flawlessly, as the great Maha Rashi would say. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is the one and only Cowboy State Politics. We'll see you tomorrow, my friends. Have a good one.